So just a few weeks ago, my dog turned 6. He's not old, but he's getting old. He's a big boy. He's a big guy. He's 105 pounds. That's the last time I went to the vet. I'm sure he's more than 105 pounds now. He eats a lot of stuff he shouldn't eat.
Yeah, on the depth chart, he's listed at 105 pounds, but he's actually 85, but he does that to look more intimidating in football, right? Yeah,
That's right.
He's an offensive lineman, yeah.
I learned actually from a sign at my vet, so take it for what it's worth, I guess, but that 90-pound plus dogs over 90 pounds, are considered geriatric by 7 years old. I guess that's just because the bigger they are, the harder they fall. I don't really know, right? But bigger dogs just don't seem to live as long as smaller dogs. Mm-hmm. Little dogs can live 15, 18, 20 years. Big dogs, it seems like it's a lot more rare that you see that. Still possible, of course, but it just so happens that they just seem to age quicker. We got him at the very beginning of COVID, right at the beginning of 2020, and he was a great thing. Honestly, I didn't want a dog, but Kirsten really did, and we ended up getting a dog, and I love him. He's so great. Wade just loves the dog and plays with him and talks to him, and it's great. But I always think, always in the back of my mind is something's going to happen someday. You can't prevent it, whether it's from old age or some accident or something happens. Your dog's going to die, right? And I hate to think about it, and I've always said, when that happens, we're not getting another one. It's just too much. But realistically, I have a son who loves my dog. I have a wife who loves dogs. So we're probably going to have to get another one. But I also just learned that maybe I won't have to worry about it. Because it turns out I can just have Cooper, my dog, forever. Because for the small price of just starting at $50,000, maybe a little bit more, depends on how big the dog is, so maybe for me a little bit more, I can get Cooper cloned.
Oh, man.
And hear me out. I don't understand all the science here. I also don't understand the ethics of any of this. I'm not trying to make some sort of weird statement here, but cloning is interesting. I've kind of gotten into sci-fi in the past year or so. I've read a lot of it. It seems like a very thing that shouldn't really be able to be happening, but it turns out there are multiple companies, 2 very large ones, that clone pets. That's like a real thing.
Yes.
Tom Brady has done it. Barbara Streisand has done it. It's a thing.
Jim Hagedorn, the CEO of Scott's Miracle-Gro, allegedly has done
really?
that. Yes.
See, that's the thing.
Yeah.
And for, like I said, $50,000 can get you the same dog, right? It has a few downsides for me, though, and hear me out. Number one, I am a pastor in the Church of the Nazarene, and it turns out the Church of the Nazarene has a stance against cloning.
Wow.
So realistically, I don't think that I'm going to be able to go through with it. I think that's probably the only hurdle for me. It's not like I couldn't afford the $50,000 because
sure. No, yeah. I mean, you've got that. Yeah.
But just because
account.
I want to keep my job, I don't want to get into that, right? But also, second problem is this: while they do share the exact same DNA, turns out they act totally different. So just so you know, for slightly more than the cost of an average new car in America, you can have another same but slightly different dog.
Welcome to the Factoid Podcast. You didn't ask for it, but we're going to tell you about it anyways. My name is Payton Gessel.
And I'm Chris Humphreys.
A few days ago, Amy and I went to see her favorite symphony performed by a live orchestra. It's called Symphonie Fantastique, and it was written about 200 years ago by Hector Berlioz. And as someone without much experience in the classical music scene, I thought this was pretty listenable, but it's a bit weird, and I think that's what made it more fun. So Berlioz kind of broke the mold in a lot of ways that made him a controversial character in the classical music scene. He pioneered the concepts of really using storytelling in your music in Symphonie Fantastique. Characters have themes that way, like there's no one walking into the scene. There's not like there's any actors, but there will be a theme that plays that tells you this person walked into the room. He wasn't classically trained in any normal methods, and he uses instruments really unconventionally. So, for example, there's a point where he has violins mimic the sound of witches cackling, and they kind of do like a kind of sound. And about halfway through this symphony, there's an oboist, and he just walks out of the room in the middle of the performance while everyone else is still vigorously playing. And Amy and I kind of look at each other and we think, is that guy okay? Like, is everything all right? But we thought, well, I don't know, maybe this is just like a Berlioz thing. So then 5 minutes later, he just starts playing outside and he does a call and response with a guy who's playing the oboe inside in the orchestra. And they also hid a bell player up in like the rafters of the concert hall for 45 minutes.
Wow.
He's got like a little TV screen so he can see what's going on down below. And he just has a giant church bell. And then he just starts chiming the church bell, the dong, dong. And the point is that it's supposed to be when like a death happens and they put the church bell so high up so it feels like it's the height of a church bell and really kind of brings you into the feel there. And then like the rest of the band starts playing this like Gregorian monk funeral chant. So it's a really like I was very excited to witness this.
Yeah.
And while Symphony Fantastique is probably Berlioz's most direct influence on the history of music, he's also discovered a very talented instrument maker who invented a very popular instrument now that we see a lot of times today. Can you guess what that instrument might be?
Harmonica.
No.
I have no idea.
The saxophone.
Ooh.
And the origins of the saxophone were so much more bizarre than I had ever imagined, and I can't wait to tell you about this. The saxophone was invented by a man named Adolphe Sax.
Okay.
Yeah, he named it after himself. And Sax is lucky to have even lived to see adulthood. This kid had several near-death experiences. For example, he fell from a 3-story building, hit his head on a rock, and everyone assumed he must be dead. But he wasn't. He drank a bowl of acid because he thought it was milk.
Wow.
Totally fine. He swallowed a pin.
Wow.
He got burned in a gunpowder explosion. He fell onto a hot cast iron frying pan.
Oh, wow.
He slept in a room with furniture varnish while it was still drying 3 different times and somehow didn't asphyxiate. And he hit his head on cobblestone and fell into a river. This is all as a child.
This guy, something's up with this guy.
Yes. His next door neighbors called him Little Sax the Ghost because they thought, he's probably going to die at some point. And there's even quotes from his mom saying that, like, he's probably not going to live. He surprisingly does survive to become an adult. And he gets right into creating and modifying instruments. His parents made instruments for a living. So his dad had kind of made him an apprentice as he was becoming a teenager. And he also played instruments, obviously. And he played the flute and he played the clarinet relatively well. And then Sax eventually moves to Paris. And that's where he meets Hector Berlioz. Berlioz loves him and writes this very nice article about him in his new instrument family called the saxophone. And this was the first woodwind instrument with a reed that was made out of brass, and he had made 7 different sizes of them. So there's maybe only a couple of them that you think of today, but there's a wide variety that he started out with. But in addition to that, he also made revisions to many other existing instruments. He wasn't always just creating new ones. His changes to the bass clarinet are still the style of bass clarinet that we use today. So that's one of his more famous ones. Most of his other revisions were named after him, though. The sax horn, the sax trombone, and the sax tuba. But my favorite sax inventions are the 2 that he was never able to execute. The Crimean War broke out in Eastern Europe in 1853, and our boy Adolphe came up with some ways that he could help out. First, there was the saxotonere, which translates to the thunder sax. And it was an engine-powered organ that would be built on the side of a hill outside of Paris. And it was going to be so loud that the entire city could hear the instrument without any need for amplification. This is a classic case of limitless creativity with no practical way to execute the idea. He never made this thing. And then still related to the Crimean War, in the response to the siege of Sevastopol, Sax started working on an invention called the saxocannon. He just pivoted from instruments into warfare, which is funny because usually it's the other way around. I was thinking about this, and Peter Tchaikovsky, he's got the famous 1812 overture, and it's got like cannons that are in the music. So instead of, or even like with rap music, like gunshots are used as sound effects in rap songs all the time. And like this works because it's like good percussion kind of sounds that come from warfare. But like Sax inverts the pipeline. Instead of assaulting the ears, he just starts to assault the cities because the saxocannon was developed to obliterate in his own words, an average sized city. It would have a half-ton, 11-yard wide mortar bullet.
Whoa.
And you have to wonder how much of this was meant for the Crimean War and how much of this was just to silence all of his haters so that they wouldn't mess with him. Because Sax's innovations in the music industry attracted a lot of haters. His two main use cases for the saxophone were the orchestra and the military band. Those are the two different ways he tried to sell it. And he invented it just a little bit too late for it to be viable in the orchestra. Just too many pieces were written without it in mind. It was hard to retrofit it. Composers weren't going to go out of their way to make it work. But he did eventually land a contract with the French military. And can you imagine how cool a military with a bunch of saxophones would sound?
Yes.
It's like you can't go to war against those guys.
No.
Yeah.
It's too good of an instrument. It's
exactly. This military contract steps on the toes of a lot of other fellow instrument makers. Because the saxophone is a very flexible instrument. It can sound like several other existing instruments. It's just very versatile. And his competitors' livelihoods are being threatened. And they say, like, this guy's going to run us out of business. We're going to unite to ruin him. And they formed the Association of United Instrument Makers. They would steal his tools, steal saxophones just from his workshop. And they even tried to burn his workshop down. There were also assassination attempts.
Wow, this guy's been through it.
Yes. Everyone in his life is trying to kill him. Like, to my knowledge, no one has ever attempted to kill me. And I have never been like that close in my life. So to think about how much he has went through, all because he made a new instrument. And he eventually gets taken to court several times over patent concerns. These kind of people they were trying to find every way to take him down. But Sax wins every single case in court, but it bankrupts him 3 times paying for all of the court cases. And then Sax survived one more brush with death. He got lip cancer, but he recovered from it. But as everyone eventually does, he dies. He died of pneumonia in 1894, poor and really without much fanfare. He kind of died relatively, I don't want to say alone, but not popular. And for the next few decades, saxophones were also not very popular, and they just weren't seen as the legitimate instrument that Adolf had hoped for. In 1903, Pope Pius X lays down a bunch of rules about which instruments could be used in the church and which ones could not, and all wind instruments are banned. So that includes the saxophone. He wasn't exactly just calling it out, but that's just one more avenue that the saxophone can't get into. It's not going to be in the church in any capacity. And then the Nazis and Joseph Stalin more explicitly did ban the saxophone. And this is because it found its way into several different marginalized groups. The 3 I want to talk about are African Americans, women, and children. So in the 1910s and 20s, there was a huge saxophone craze in the U.S. You had a couple decades of kind of it not being really popular, and then it just takes off in the U.S. And at that time, it wasn't considered proper for women to play an instrument in public. So because of this, suffragettes, which is a term for women who wanted the right to vote, because this was right around that time, they would purposely form all-women, all-saxophone bands, and they would play them all in public places. And as this popularity continued, the manufacturers of saxophones, they started selling them to schools on the cheap to help capitalize on a new generation. Get the kids hooked on the saxophones.
Start them young.
Right, so they'll never go away. And with all these saxophones becoming easy and cheap to get, a lot of African-American culture at that time begins to incorporate the saxophone into jazz music. And jazz becomes very popular and divisive in the 20s. And it's often being played at nightclubs and parties, which kind of gave it that seedy reputation that I feel like the saxophone has a little bit more of a reputation than the average instrument. Sure. But jazz is really like the reason why we're still talking about saxophones today. So you got to give jazz credit for kind of amplifying as much as they have. But even as recently as the 1950s, there were controversies about the saxophone being like a questionable instrument. So in the 1950s, there was a film adaptation of A Streetcar Named Desire. And there was a film advocacy group called the National League of Decency. And it was a group of Catholics that would screen movies in advance and give them a stamp of approval, essentially. And this doesn't seem like that big of a deal. It just seems like a group that's reviewing stuff. But at the time, they had so much power that if they didn't give their approval on a screening, you were basically forced to make all of their edits because there was such a big body of Catholics in the U.S. that would listen to them that then no one would go see your movie and you would just make no money. So they had a lot of power. And so they're watching A Streetcar Named Desire. And there was a scene in the movie where there was a romantic couple comes back together after a big fight. And there's a saxophone solo playing underneath that. And that National League of Decency says, you've got to change the music because it's too carnal. And I was reading an article about the director. The director was talking about his frustrations with this process. And he said that, like, we just changed it to a French horn and it got approved. And I guarantee you that if you weren't listening for it, you wouldn't have even noticed that the instrument changed. It was such a minor thing that he really just blames on the saxophone and nothing else. So in the modern day, I'd say that saxophone, it pretty much easily wins the award as being the most chill instrument. I feel like saxophones have I'd say a pretty good reputation these days. They're a symbol of being cool and smooth. There's been a lot of celebrities and pop culture icons. I think Bill Clinton comes to mind as, like, he might not be the best saxophone player, but, like, famous person who likes the saxophone. Lisa Simpson from The Simpsons. She heavily influenced. There's a lot of, like, 40 and 50-year-old women who are saxophone players today now because of Lisa Simpson. And I find it hilarious that, like, the saxophone came from poor little Adolf, who lived the least chill life. And while his weapon inventions like the saxocannon and the saxotonere were never realized, he was able to create a saxophone, which I might say is the real weapon that changed the course of history.
So I have always been taught, if you find yourself in a situation, just pretend that you know what you're doing and people will believe you. Do you have any, like, experience with that? Have you ever seen that?
I like to do that. I mean, there are times when I will try to convince people that I'm, like, an expert on something that I know absolutely nothing about. The strategy is just to say a bunch of words that are relatively complicated sounding. And most people will assume that, oh, yeah, you must know what you're talking about.
You actually do know. That's the thing. I think it's true. I think if, in a lot of situations anyway, and if you're around enough people who don't know about the thing, you really can seem like you know what you're talking about. In practice, I don't live my life like this. I've come to the realization that I am most definitely not smart enough, and I always default to asking other people for help, right? I always assume I don't know the answer, even if I think I do. Yeah. Somewhat to a fault. I try pretty hard to learn as much as I can from as many people as I can. And in fact, so much so that, like, I found myself in a conversation with someone who's, like, maybe offered their help to me. Like, I've expressed, hey, I need help in this, or I don't know about this. It's like, oh, let me help you with that. And then I'll go into a conversation or meeting with them and realize I actually know more about it than they do. Because again, they're in a room most of the time where no one knows and they know more, but it's like, oh, I do know some. I just am, I guess, downplaying sometimes the amount I know in order to learn more about it.
Sure, yeah. I love being the dumbest person in the room. And, like, to be clear, I only do that kind of thing that I was saying before for comedic impact.
Right, of course.
And then immediately I'm like, oh, I'm just kidding. I don't know anything about this.
That's not how, you're not just like that at every party where that's just... But all that to say is, if you're confident and you're in a place where someone thinks you should be the leader, people will listen to you. I've done quite a few jobs in my adult career. Well, I guess even before I became an adult. I mowed yards when I was a kid. When I was, 13, 14 years old, 12, 13, 14, I mowed yards for some people around town. My dad used to mow yards, and I would help him. In college, I got my first real job. I don't know if you'd actually call it a real job. It was a college student job, but I worked at the front desk. I answered the phones, and I was over the lost and found of the campus. It was actually a great job. I still have some very nice stuff I wouldn't have had if I didn't get it from the lost and found. So I've mowed lawns, I've worked at the front desk and answered phones. I have been an audio-video equipment installer. I have been a worship pastor. I've been a fleet delivery driver for a dealership. I've been a pizza chef, and I've driven for a distribution company. I've also, now I guess, I'm a pastor. I've been that for quite some time. I've done a lot of jobs. All I'm saying is I've worked in a lot of various things in a lot of different ways. I've enjoyed all of it. I feel like every time I do a new thing, it's just fun to learn all about that thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I've done all those things.
I mean, it's some of the reason why I enjoy working in video, because it is a skill that you can pair with a lot of other skills. and that you get to just hang out with experts
Right.
in every different kind of field.
That's right.
Because they all want a video in some capacity. So I get the desire to
Yes.
just like learn all the things.
I think it's so interesting. But would you believe if I told you, out of all the jobs I've done, out of all the jobs I've applied for, been in all these interviews and situations, that only one job out of all of the times have they ever checked my references?
That's crazy.
Yeah. Is that the experience that you've had or no?
I don't know if they verbally told me. And you're saying jobs that you actually got or just jobs you applied for?
All of the above. Like, I don't know if it's because I've never been a serious applicant for a crazy job or what, but in my experience, they just don't actually check the references. If they like you in the interview, if they know you from some other way, if someone told them to listen to you, they just don't do that. Actually, and I'm a pastor, and in the Church of the Nazarene, where I'm a pastor, you have to go to this thing called you have to get this thing called a district license. It's like a step on the way to being ordained. Once you get a district license, you're qualified to do all the things on your own that a pastor does. And then ordination is just like to say that you've done it for a little longer and you get another piece of paper, right? But when I got my district license, you have to go through an interview process with a panel of a bunch of pastors.
I've heard about this kind of thing.
And it's a little bit of an intimidating thing, and they ask you questions, and they expect a certain level of understanding, a theological answer, and whatever. But also, you have to turn in paperwork with references, with character references, with work references, and all of this. And the one time ever that my references have been checked was that time. And I went into this interview, and this is just to give me my license. It's not even for a job. I was just in college at the time. But they called the church that I was working at. I was a volunteer, so I didn't work there. But they called the church I was working at, and the pastor got so upset with me because she thought that it was from a new job that they were calling.
Oh, no.
And I was like, no. They're just asking you if I'm okay to be a pastor, basically. So she's like, oh, okay, that makes me feel better. And so it was just one of those times where kind of a funny situation. But that's the only time in all of my experience that they have ever checked my references. And it turns out that maybe I'm not alone in this. I thought maybe it was just because I didn't have a high stakes job or a really crazy like high end or high paying or whatever job. But it turns out maybe they don't do the groundwork in high stakes jobs either. In the past few years of my life, as you know very well, and our listeners know a little bit, I've spent a pretty substantial amount of time in a hospital. Even more if you just add in appointments at doctors and surgeons and specialists. I have been in the doctor's presence or in a hospital or in a place that is medically related for like literal months of my life in the past years. It's a pretty crazy system, the medical system. People are everywhere. There are departments, they do everything, and they need to work together well, but it simultaneously feels like they know everything about you while knowing almost nothing about you at the same time. If you've ever been to the doctor, you probably know what I'm talking about. If you ever go to the ER, you know what I'm talking about.
Yep.
You walk in and the front desk person asks you all these questions and they take all your vitals. And then you go to a room and they ask you the same exact questions and they take all your vitals. And it's like they've never seen it before. And then another person comes in, and anytime any person comes in, they ask you what your date of birth is and what your name is. And it's like, don't you know by now? And I get that there are reasons that they do all this, but it's like, do I need to answer all these questions all the time? I obviously don't feel very good. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
It's
Don't make me do extra work.
Exactly. Yeah. I just don't feel like doing it, but it just feels like, do they know what they're doing? Maybe they do. I don't know. But I've spent a lot of time at doctors, more than I ever thought I would really in my whole life, but just in the last year or so. And one of my biggest irrational fears that I don't think I'm alone in is that I would get something done to me that they didn't mean to do, right? That they meant to do for somebody else, or like that they took the wrong thing out, or that they put the hole in the wrong spot or whatever.
And
right?
now you have one kidney. Yeah.
That's right. Exactly. And there's stories about this that you see that it happens. And I think that still is in the realm of irrational fear, but it's something that I've always thought about. I've just always been a person that trusts that the people that need to do the things they need to do are there, and that they'll do it right, and that they know what to do, and that they'll go to the right places and do the right things. But what if the people that fill those spaces are just people like me and you who are pretending to be confident and do it well enough that nobody questions it?
Oh, no.
New fear unlocked is what that means. I would like to introduce you to Dennis Edward Rourke, a well-established, very experienced, quote, doctor, a man whose journey into the world of medicine began as a child who was meticulously piecing together an animal skeleton in his backyard. A man whose resume tells us that not only does he have degrees from Wayne State University and the prestigious Rush University Medical College, but he also pursued doctorate and postgraduate work and research to assist him even further on his medical journey. Although his resume does seem to speak about his relatively glowing qualifications, reality is that he doesn't even have a bachelor's degree from any college. In fact, he kind of just seems like a guy who was fascinated with medicine and wanted to see what he could get away with. Over the course of his career, he was a surgical resident, at Western Reserve Health System in Youngstown, Ohio, a second-year resident at St. Joseph Mercy Hospital in Michigan, and his third and fourth-year residency were completed at the Medical College of Ohio in Toledo. He was a physician for 4 years at Madison Heights Community Hospital and simultaneously worked employed as a doctor at the Visiting Physicians Association of Southfield. Again, I want to remind you, this is a guy who does not have any education. His medical career spanned from 1980 to 1998. That's 18 years. I'm not sure if you're aware, but that is the entire life of a full-grown adult. 18 years he practiced medicine without a single ounce of actual academic medical knowledge or qualifications. And this is where it gets a little crazy. This is where I don't like to think about going to the doctor anymore. He is confirmed to have either participated in or assisted in or led over 300 surgical procedures.
Oh, no.
More than 200 of those, which were performed by himself.
Now, the question is, and you might answer this eventually, if you do this enough, do you kind of get good?
I this whole time, it seems like, I'm not going to try to pretend to say that being a doctor is not a very difficult skill, but there's got to be pieces of it that anyone could be like, yeah, just go in there and take that and then you're good. You know what I'm saying? There's got to be pieces that can just be explained quickly.
Yes. Like, I feel like if you asked me to make an incision and I did it 300 times, I mean, making sure to do it well enough that you don't get caught as like as a fraud or something. But like, I think if I had 300 chances by the time I get to number 25, I'm probably doing okay.
Yeah, I feel like that's true because there's the way things feel and all that, but it's like, and I think the hardest part is you don't have much experimental time. You know what I mean? It's like, I'm in here doing this for the first time. I told him I've already done this, but I guess we'll see how it goes. You know what I'm saying?
Our boy just likes to learn on the job.
That's right. And he got very good at it, apparently. Good enough to do this for 18 years. He's actually been confirmed by the hospitals he worked at, so not just hearsay or some story. He's been confirmed to say that he was a part of multiple very complex surgical procedures, including, but not limited to, heart and lung transplants, open heart surgery, and limb amputations.
Oh my gosh.
I know. It's like, and again, he's a resident for most of this, so residents aren't going to get, I've watched doctor shows, I know how it works, okay?
Right, exactly.
Residents don't get to do everything, but like, again, I watch doctor shows. There are points in residency where they do get to do the whole thing because that's what it's for, right? It's like training. It's like on-the-job training where you get to actually do the thing eventually. Someone's there to watch you and help you, so apparently there's a lot of that's as important because they could teach anybody to do it, but also not everyone, because when you're alone, you gotta know what you're doing. You gotta have a knowledge base. This guy did not have that knowledge base. Talk about not checking references. Like I said, I've been under the care of countless doctors, most of which I don't even remember what their names are. I don't know if they were men or women. I was half asleep for most of them. I get bills from these people who I think, I don't know who you are, but I'm sure I probably do owe you money. I'm beginning to wonder if anyone in my sphere of connection isn't as qualified as they say they are. I know this is, again, probably irrational. It's probably not true. And this type of thing, while rare, is common enough that there's a whole Wikipedia page dedicated to it. It's called Quackery.
Wow.
And it goes into detail specifically about how medical quackery, according to Wikipedia, is often used interchangeably with the term health fraud. It's defined as promotion of medical practices that are either fraudulent or based on ignorance. And so there are very, very few of the cases recorded like Dennis Rourke. More of them are like different types of medical fraud. More commonly being like maybe like selling a supplement that you say does something that doesn't actually, right? So quackery goes into all these things.
Like your snake oil.
Sure,
back in the old
exactly.
days.
Just false advertising, just making stuff up, right? And that's common. But like it's like one of the most common forms of scam for like older people is like they hear something will help my arthritis and you take this pill and you buy it. You know what I'm saying? That happens. It's kind of a way that people are taking advantage of a lot. That is a big reason why it's so common. There are like tens of thousands of people in other countries that are known. Like it's very prevalent in America, but also a lot of places it happens. And there are more cases of doctors doing crazy things like this. There's a podcast that I listened to years ago called Dr. Death. It's, I think, even a TV show now. Same kind of idea, right? Just doctors and nurses doing these things that are, they're not really qualified or whatever. They shouldn't be doing, but they're doing them. And while it's uncommon, but still happens, I'm pretty sure it isn't the norm. But there's a small piece of my brain that thinks it could be slightly more prominent than even the research that we have, even the understanding of this. Maybe there's a chance that it's even more so than that. People are smart, so hear me out. I'm not saying you should be paranoid. No, don't be paranoid. But there is a small chance that the primary form of verification for the guy that's about to put you under is a fake PDF that he made up from a document from 1986, along with a voicemail box that he set up himself.
Thank you for listening to the Factoid Podcast. If you have a factoid that you want to share with us, send us an email at whatsyours@factoidpodcast.com.
You can find us any place that you get your podcasts or on our website, factoidpodcast.com.
We'll see you in 2 weeks.